After my wife died, I gave my son and his wife my savings, my building, and 18 months of unpaid work to help them open a furniture company. At the grand opening, she erased my name, called me a penniless loser, and ordered me out while my son stayed silent. I left with $312 and one brass key. 15 years later, she walked into my workshop holding papers she could not use without me. And then I saw who was standing behind her. The night my daughter-in-law called me a loser, 53 people were standing inside a building I owned. She did it with a champagne glass in one hand and a smile polished so bright that, for half a second, some of the guests thought she was making a joke. "Thomas has always been good with his hands," Natalie said, looking directly at me. "But let's be honest. A man his age with no house, no company, and nothing left in the bank doesn't have much to be proud of." A few people stared into their drinks. One man gave a nervous cough. My son, Eric, stood 3 feet from her beneath the new brass sign that read Mercer House Furnishings. He did not defend me. He did not even look at me. He studied the bubbles rising in his glass as if the answer to everything might be floating there. I remember the details because humiliation makes a photographer out of the mind. The white tulips on the showroom tables. The smell of lemon oil on walnut cabinets I had sanded with my own hands. The quartet in the corner stopping halfway through a song. My 7-year-old grandson, Caleb, sitting on the staircase with a wooden bird in his lap, watching the adults without understanding why the room had gone cold. And behind Eric and Natalie, mounted under a spotlight, was a plaque thanking the people who had made the business possible. Their names were first. The architect came next, then the banker, the designer, 3 investors, and even the caterer. Mine was not there. 18 months earlier, the building had been an abandoned brick warehouse on Mill Street in Dayton, Ohio. It had broken windows, warped floors, and rainwater running through a hole in the roof. I had put $64,800 into turning it into that showroom. I had worked 6 days a week without wages. I had built the reception desk, the display walls, the sample kitchen, the floating staircase, and the walnut bar from which Natalie was now insulting me. I had done it because Eric was my only son, because my wife had died, and because grief can make a man mistake being needed for being loved. Natalie placed her glass on my bar. "You asked why your name isn't on the plaque," she said. "That is why. Tonight is about achievement, Tom. We cannot present a struggling retiree as the foundation of a luxury brand." "I was told I would own 30% of that brand," I said. She gave a soft laugh. "You were told we would take care of you. We did. You stayed upstairs without paying rent for a year." I looked at Eric. "Is that how you remember it?" His mouth opened, but Natalie answered for him. "Eric remembers that you wanted to help your family. There are moments when anger arrives like fire. This was not one of them. What I felt was colder. I understood, finally, that every unfinished conversation, every delayed contract, every assurance that family did not need paperwork had been leading to that room. My son had not forgotten to protect my interest. He had chosen not to. Natalie reached beneath the bar and withdrew a white envelope. "There are papers upstairs for the last vendor accounts," she said. "Sign them tonight. Then I think it would be healthiest if you found somewhere else to stay. We need the loft for client meetings." Caleb stood so quickly that the wooden bird fell to the floor. "Grandpa lives here." Natalie's eyes moved toward him. "Caleb, go with the sitter." He did not move. I crossed the room, picked up the bird, and placed it back in his hands. It was a small wren carved from maple, unfinished on the underside because he liked to feel the tool marks with his thumb. "Keep this safe for me," I whispered. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" he asked. I wanted to say yes. A grandfather should not lie to a child, especially when the other adults in the room have already made lying look so easy. "I don't know," I told him, "but none of this is your fault." Upstairs, I packed 2 shirts, 1 pair of work pants, Ruth's photograph, my grandfather's folding ruler, and the medication I took for my blood pressure. My entire personal bank balance was $312.17. I wrote the number on the back of the receipt because I wanted to remember the exact price of the lesson. Before closing my suitcase, I took one more thing from the drawer, a small brass key attached to a faded blue tag. Natalie had never asked what it opened. Eric followed me to the stairwell. Music had started again below us, too loud now, the way music sounds when people are trying to cover something shameful. "Dad," he said, "maybe give her a few days to cool down." "She is not angry," I said. "She is finished using me." "That's not fair." I looked at my son then, really looked at him. He was 35 years old, wearing a custom suit purchased with money from the business I had helped build. But for a moment I saw the boy who used to hide behind me during thunderstorms. I had protected that boy from every noise in the dark. Somewhere along the way, I had protected him from so many consequences that he had never learned to stand in front of one. "No," I said quietly, "it is not fair." He reached for my suitcase. I kept my hand on it. "Where will you go?" he asked. "I will figure that out." "You don't have anything." From the showroom below us, Natalie called his name. Eric turned toward her voice before he turned back to me. That small movement told me more than an apology could have. I walked out of Mercer House Furnishings at 9:40 that night. It was raining, and the lettering above the door shone gold in the wet street. I had $312, one suitcase, and a key in my coat pocket. Natalie believed she had just thrown a penniless old carpenter out of her new company. She was wrong about only one thing. The most important paper in that building had never been signed. To explain why I gave so much away, I have to tell you about Ruth. My wife could look at a cracked chair and see the dinner-table arguments it had survived. She believed furniture remembered people. We met in 1978 when she brought a broken rocker into my father's repair shop and insisted it was worth saving, though one leg had split and half the cane was missing. I told her buying another chair would cost less. She told me some things were expensive precisely because they could not be replaced. I repaired the rocker. She married me 11 months later. We bought the Mill Street warehouse in 1994, when that part of Dayton was mostly empty factories and boarded windows. Ruth ran the books for my custom cabinet business, and I filled the ground floor with saws, clamps, lumber racks, and more confidence than money. Eric grew up sweeping sawdust into crooked piles. He was never patient enough for joinery, but he could talk to anyone. At 16, he sold a dining table before I had finished building it. Ruth said I should stop wishing he were another version of me and notice what he could actually do. For 20 years, the three of us made a good life inside that old brick shell. Not a rich life, but a useful one. Then Ruth found a lump beneath her arm. By the time the doctors named it, the cancer had already moved. We spent 14 months measuring time in appointments, test results, and paper cups of hospital coffee. Near the end, she made me promise two things. Do not turn grief into a locked room, and do not let Eric confuse confidence with character. I kept the first promise badly. The second, I did not keep at all. After Ruth died, I closed the cabinet shop. Every machine carried the shape of her absence. Eric was working in commercial furniture sales then. He had married Natalie 3 years earlier, and they had Caleb, a bright, serious boy who loved the workshop. Eric came to me with a plan. Luxury buyers were moving back into renovated downtown buildings. They wanted American-made furniture with a family story behind it. He could sell the story. Natalie, who had studied marketing, could build the brand. I had the building, the equipment, and the craftsmanship. It would keep Mom's legacy alive, Eric said. That sentence opened every door I should have kept closed. The bank would not finance a new company without a long-term right to occupy the property. I refused to mortgage Mill Street because it was the only asset Ruth and I had kept debt-free. Our attorney, Helen Cho, proposed a long-term commercial lease instead. Mercer House Furnishings would use the building for 15 years at $1 per year. The company would pay taxes, insurance, and maintenance. At the end of the term, it could request a purchase, but ownership would transfer only through a separate written agreement signed by both sides. Helen put that language in bold. "Thomas," she said at the closing table, "the lease protects the land. It does not protect your promised share of the company. You need an operating agreement for that." Eric leaned toward me. "Dad, we haven't even decided whether to make it an LLC or an S corporation. Let us get through construction. We will do the ownership papers before opening." Natalie squeezed my hand. "You are family. We would never leave you out." I signed the lease. I did not insist on the operating agreement. The first 6 months felt like hope. Caleb came after school and sat on an overturned bucket while I repaired the roof joists. Eric brought clients through the dust and described what the showroom would become. Natalie photographed my hands shaping wood and posted the pictures online under captions about 3 generations of Mercer craftsmanship. She called me the soul of the brand when she needed content. She called me difficult when I asked about invoices. My savings disappeared slowly enough to feel reasonable. $12,000 for the roof, $8,000 for electrical work, $5,000 for the heating system. Then deposits, permits, display hardware, and a shortfall when a private investor withdrew. Each time, Eric promised reimbursement after opening. I recorded every transfer in a green ledger, the same way Ruth had taught me. By the end, I had contributed $64,800 in cash and more than 3,000 hours of labor. The operating agreement never arrived. When I asked, Natalie said their accountant was revising it. Then she said a lender objected to a retired minority member. Then she said my contribution would be recognized as founder equity after the first fiscal year. Eric repeated each explanation as if repetition made it true. 2 weeks before the grand opening, I found the incorporation documents in a printer tray. Mercer House Furnishings LLC belonged 60% to Natalie and 40% to Eric. My name appeared once, in an attachment labeling the $64,800 as a non-repayable family gift. I carried the page to Eric. He read it, rubbed both hands over his face, and said, "That is temporary. A filed document is not temporary. Natalie says changing it now could scare the bank. What do you say?" He looked toward the office where his wife was speaking on the phone. "I say we fix it after opening." That was the first time I knew. The party was simply the first time they knew I knew. The envelope Natalie left upstairs on opening night contained 4 routine vendor releases and a 5th document folded behind them. The 5th page referred to an exercise of purchase rights under the Mill Street lease. It did not list a price. It did not include a purchase contract. It contained a signature line for me and a space for a notary. Had I signed everything where she marked the yellow tabs, she would later have claimed I intended to transfer the building. Perhaps she believed that. Perhaps she only wanted a piece of paper vague enough to frighten me. Either way, I put the first 4 documents in one stack and the 5th in another. I signed nothing. I folded the 5th page inside Ruth's old ledger and placed it in the metal deed box bolted beneath my workbench. I carried the 4 routine vendor releases with me so Eric could return them to the suppliers. Then I locked the box and put the brass key in my pocket. That was the key I carried into the rain. I did not go far at first. Pride wanted me to walk until Dayton disappeared behind me, but my knees were 59 years old and my suitcase had a broken wheel. I reached a 24-hour diner 6 blocks away and sat beneath a buzzing light with coffee I did not want. The waitress, a woman named Denise, noticed my wet coat and brought me a clean towel without asking questions. That simple kindness nearly broke me more than Natalie's cruelty had. I counted my money as if counting could create more of it. $240 in my checking account, $72 in my wallet, and 17 cents that did not matter, except that I had worked my entire adult life and could name every penny left. I had Social Security coming the following month, but most of it had already been committed to medical bills, insurance, and a small life insurance loan from Ruth's treatment. The Mill Street Company paid $1 a year in rent. I had designed the lease that way to help my son qualify for financing. Generosity, I learned, can become a trap with your own handwriting on it. At 11:30, Eric entered the diner. He sat across from me without removing his coat. "You should come back," he said. "Did Natalie send you?" "Caleb is crying." "Then tell him the truth." Eric stared at the sugar packets. "What truth is that?" "That his mother removed his grandfather from a business he paid to build, and his father watched." "Dad, keep your voice down." There were only 4 people in the diner, and none cared about us. Yet Eric's first instinct was still to manage appearances. "You think tonight made me look small?" I said. "What you did before tonight is what made you small." His jaw tightened. "You always do this. You make it sound like I am still a kid in your shop. Then stop waiting for someone else to tell you what to say." For one hopeful second, he looked ready to do it. He met my eyes. "The company cannot carry 3 owners right now," he said. "Natalie says once we stabilize." I held up my hand. "There she is again." He went quiet. I slid the 4 unsigned vendor releases across the table. "These are legitimate. The 5th paper is not. Tell her I found it." Color left his face. "What 5th paper?" I watched him carefully. Surprise can be performed, but fear moves faster. His pupils shifted toward the envelope before his expression caught up. He knew there had been another page, even if he did not know exactly what it said. "I will honor the lease," I told him. 15 years, $1 a year. You have use of a debt-free building because I wanted you to succeed, but the building is not yours, and I am not signing it away. If you leave now, Natalie will say you abandoned us. Will you?" He did not answer. I took back the papers. "There is your choice, Eric. Not 15 years from now. Tonight." He stood, placed a $20 bill beside my coffee, and walked out. I left the bill for Denise. Just after midnight, my phone rang. It was not Eric. Natalie's voice was quiet and hard. If you contact Caleb after tonight, I will tell the police you are harassing my family. He is my grandson. He is our son. You do not get to confuse him because your feelings are hurt. Let me speak to Eric. Eric agrees with me. Behind her, I heard Caleb call, "Grandpa?" Then the line went dead. The voicemail system on my old phone saved messages automatically. Natalie may not have realized the first part of her call had been recorded when I failed to answer quickly enough. I listened to it twice, then forwarded the audio file to an email account Ruth had once used for business records. I did not know whether it would ever matter. I only knew that when someone begins rewriting your life, you should keep the original pages. At 2 in the morning, I called Owen Price. Owen and I had served together in an Army maintenance unit in the late 1970s. We had not been close for years, but he still sent a Christmas card with the same short message: "If you ever need a wrench or a witness, call me." He lived in Springfield, less than 30 miles away, and managed the repair workshop at St. Luke's Community Center. "Tom," he said, his voice thick with sleep, "who died?" "No one tonight." He waited. "I need a place to set down a suitcase," I said, "just for one night." "Bus station or diner?" "Diner. I will be there in 40 minutes. He arrived in 36. Before leaving Dayton, I asked him to drive past Mill Street one last time. The party had ended. Through the upstairs window, I saw Natalie moving between boxes in the loft that had been my home. Eric stood near the glass with his hands in his pockets. For a moment, I thought he saw Owen's truck across the street. If he did, he gave no sign. On the back steps, beneath the security light, Caleb was sitting in his pajamas. He still held the wooden bird. I put my hand against the truck window. He could not see me through the rain. Owen did not ask why we remained there for several minutes. Finally, he shifted into gear. "Where to?" he asked. I looked at the brass key in my palm. "Anywhere I can earn tomorrow's breakfast." At 59, with $312 to my name, I believed I was beginning from nothing. I would not understand until much later that nothing and alone are not the same thing. Owen lived above a closed pharmacy in Springfield. His apartment had one bedroom, a sofa that folded into something shaped like a punishment, and a kitchen table covered in carburetor parts. He gave me the bedroom and slept on the sofa before I could argue. The next morning, he drove me to St. Luke's Community Center, an old school building that served lunch to seniors, offered after-school care, and kept a repair shop in the former gymnasium. The shop smelled of cold metal and forgotten projects. Half the fluorescent lights did not work. A planer stood against the wall with its belt housing open. "Motor burned out 6 months ago," Owen said. "Board has no money for a new one." I rolled the shaft by hand. "Motor is fine. Bearing seized and through the belt." "You know that by touching it?" "I know because burned motors smell worse than your coffee." By noon, I had cleaned the bearing seat, machined a temporary spacer from a steel washer, and found a replacement belt at a farm supply store. The parts cost $27. Owen paid me $90 from the center's maintenance budget, then insisted on reimbursing the parts. It was the first money I had earned since Mercer House opened. I held those bills longer than necessary. Not because $90 was much, but because it had not been given out of pity or taken in the name of family. I had solved a problem. Someone had paid the agreed price. The simplicity felt almost luxurious. That afternoon, a woman named Lila Bennett arrived carrying a maple dining chair with one arm removed. Her husband had suffered a stroke, and the chair no longer fit beneath the transfer board he used to move from his wheelchair. A medical equipment supplier had offered a plastic chair for $400. Lila wanted the old one adapted because she and her husband had eaten breakfast in those chairs for 32 years. I remembered Ruth's rocker. "Come back Friday," I said. Owen raised an eyebrow after she left. "You have lumber?" "No." "Special hardware?" "No." "A place to sleep after my back gives out on that sofa?" "Also no." He laughed for the first time since picking me up. We found maple offcuts in the storage room, made a reinforced removable arm, widened the front rail, and added a grip where Leela's husband could steady himself. She cried when she tested it. Then she asked if we could modify 2 more chairs for members of their stroke support group. That was how my second life began. Not with an investor, a winning lottery ticket, or a secret fortune, but with a broken planer and a chair that needed one arm to move. I rented a room from a retired school custodian named Mr. Talbot for $375 a month, utilities included. My Social Security covered the rent and basic food. Repair work covered everything else. For the first year, I took whatever jobs came through St. Luke's: loose banisters, wheelchair ramps, cabinet doors, porch steps, and furniture people could not afford to replace. I learned which thrift store marked down coats on Tuesdays and which grocery reduced bread after 7 in the evening. I kept my blood pressure pills in an old tobacco tin because the cap on the pharmacy bottle cracked. Nothing about that year looked like success from the outside. Inside me, something steady was returning. Every Sunday, I wrote to Caleb. I told him about the planer, the chair, the first snow, and a red-tailed hawk that nested near the center. I never wrote about Natalie's insult or Eric's silence. A child should not be recruited into an adult war. I enclosed small drawings of woodworking joints and questions about school. The first 2 letters disappeared without response. The third came back marked "not at this address," though I knew the address was correct. The fourth returned with "refused" written across the front in blue ink. I called Eric. Natalie answered. "We discussed this." "You discussed it." I did not agree. "Caleb is doing better without the instability." "A birthday card is instability? You walked away from his home in the middle of the night. You ordered me out. That is your version." I asked for my son. She ended the call. Helen Cho advised me that grandparents in Ohio did not have automatic visitation rights simply because contact was being denied. A court could sometimes intervene, especially after a parent's death or family disruption, but litigation might last years and put Caleb in the center. "You have evidence they are blocking you," she said. "Keep it. Continue writing in a respectful way. Do not give Natalie an excuse to characterize you as threatening." So I kept writing. I sent each letter by ordinary mail and a copy every few months by certified mail. I stored the returned envelopes in a plastic file box beneath my rented bed. On Caleb's 8th birthday, I sent plans for a simple birdhouse. It returned unopened. On his 9th, I sent a photograph of Ruth holding him as a baby. It returned with the envelope torn. On his 10th, I sent a $10 bill, because $10 had felt like treasure when I was 10. The envelope came back, but the bill was missing. Owen found me holding that empty envelope at the workbench. "You can spend your whole life knocking on a door someone else locked," he said. "What do I do instead?" "Build another door. Make sure the boy can find it when he is old enough." That night I created a second file, one I labeled "For Caleb, if he ever asks." Into it I placed copies of every letter, postal receipt, photograph, and the saved recording of Natalie's call. I did not know where the door would be. I only knew Owen was right. Someday my grandson might come looking for the truth. And if he did, grief and memory would not be enough. He deserved records. 6 weeks later, St. Luke's received a call from the rehabilitation department at Miami Valley Hospital. Lila Bennett had shown a therapist the chair we modified. The hospital wanted to know whether we could build an adjustable bedside table that looked like furniture instead of medical equipment. Owen covered the phone and looked at me. "Can we?" I thought of the $27 in parts, the $90 payment, and Ruth insisting that some things mattered because they could not be replaced. "Tell them we can build one," I said. "Then we will learn how to build 20. Hospitals do not buy equipment because a sad story moves them. They buy specifications, insurance, cleanable finishes, load ratings, delivery schedules, and proof that the person making promises can meet them." Our first prototype failed 3 of the hospital's 7 tests. The height mechanism pinched a nurse's glove, the finish clouded under disinfectant, and one wheel lifted when the table carried too much weight at the edge. I was embarrassed. Maria Alvarez was not. Maria worked in hospital procurement and attended St. Luke's on Sundays. She stood beside the failed table with a clipboard and said, "Good, now you know what the sales brochure would have hidden from you." "That is one way to describe failure," I said. "Failure with measurements is research." She helped us read the procurement standards and locate a local testing lab. Owen redesigned the wheelbase. I enclosed the mechanism and changed the finish. A retired machinist from the center, Arthur Bell, produced a stronger lift screw. Our second prototype passed 6 tests. The third passed all 7. The hospital ordered 12 tables. We had no company, no delivery truck, and no legal right to run commercial production inside the community center. Maria made a list. First, form an entity. Second, cost every hour and screw. Third, stop treating your labor as free. That last instruction was aimed at me. We formed Second Grain Workshop Cooperative because Owen said old wood deserved a second grain, and old workers did too. Each founding worker bought 1 voting share for $100. I did not have $100 to spare, so the cooperative withheld $10 from my first 10 paychecks. No outside investor could take control. Wages came before distributions. Major decisions required worker votes. Maria left the hospital a year later to become our operations manager, after we could pay her 70% of her old salary. She said the reduction was worth no longer attending meetings where people used the word efficiency to mean making nurses walk farther. We leased a 6,000 square foot former appliance store on the edge of Springfield. The roof leaked in 2 places, but not above the machines. A community bank loaned us $85,000 against signed hospital purchase orders and a state small business guarantee. There was no dramatic moment when anyone handed me a fortune. There were mornings when payroll cleared by $31. There were winters when I repaired delivery pallets at night because scrap oak cost less than new stock. We grew because customers returned, and customers returned because the tables did not wobble. By our 4th year, we employed 18 people, including 6 workers over 60 and 3 veterans with disabilities. We built adaptive desks, transfer benches, adjustable kitchen stations, and ordinary furniture designed for bodies that did not move in ordinary ways. By our 7th year, 2 regional hospital systems used our products. By our 10th, Second Grain had 46 employee owners and a paid-off building. I never became a celebrity. I never bought a mansion. I purchased a 2-bedroom bungalow near Snyder Park, drove a used Ford truck, and kept making my own coffee. But I was no longer the man counting bread discounts at 7 in the evening. More important, I was no longer measuring my worth by whether Eric called. He called 3 times in the first 5 years. The first time, he asked if I had changed my mind about signing the property paperwork. I asked him to bring Caleb and meet me in Helen's office. He said Natalie would never allow it. The second time, he told me Mercer House was opening a second showroom and offered to put my photograph on a wall labeled Our Heritage. I asked whether my ownership share had been documented. He called me bitter and hung up. The third call came after midnight on Ruth's birthday. Eric sounded as if he had been drinking. "Caleb asks about you," he said. "Put him on the phone. He is asleep. Then give me a number where I can call tomorrow." There was a long silence. "Natalie says you will try to turn him against us." "What do you say?" He began to cry. Not loudly. The sound was almost just breathing. "I don't know how to fix this. Start by telling one truth." The line went quiet, then disconnected. He did not call the next day. I continued sending letters, 58 in all over 15 years. Some returned quickly. Others came back months later, stained and bent. A few never returned, and I allowed myself to imagine Caleb had seen them. I later learned Natalie kept 3. Not out of mercy, but because she wanted samples of my signature. At Second Grain, we developed an apprenticeship program with the County Technical College. I insisted every apprentice learn estimating and bookkeeping along with tools. A skilled worker who cannot read a contract is useful to people who want to take advantage of him. I knew that lesson cost exactly $64,800, 3,000 hours, and a place in my grandson's childhood. On the cooperative's 10th anniversary, the workers surprised me with a plaque. I felt my chest tighten when Maria pulled away the cloth. Plaques had become complicated objects for me. This one did not list founders in gold letters. It listed every employee owner alphabetically, from Alvarez to Young. My name appeared between McBride and Nguyen, the same size as everyone else's. "You look disappointed," Owen whispered. "No," I said. "I am exactly where I belong." That photograph appeared in the local newspaper. 2 weeks later, Mercer House Furnishings changed the history page on its website. The phrase, "3 generations of craftsmanship," disappeared. In its place, Natalie wrote that she and Eric had rescued a derelict family property and built a company without inherited wealth or outside help. Maria printed the page in case it mattered later. I placed it in the file. "Does it make you angry?" she asked. "Yes, you hide it well." I used to think being calm meant not feeling anger. Now I think it means deciding what the anger is allowed to build. I looked across the shop at an apprentice teaching Owen how to use the new digital cutter. 15 years earlier, Natalie had called me a man with nothing to be proud of. If I had spent every day imagining her apology, she would still have owned those years. Instead, we had built tables that helped people feed themselves, kitchens a wheelchair could enter, and jobs where older hands were not treated as expired equipment. I did not know it yet, but Natalie had spent those same years building toward one final transaction. She believed the Mill Street property was the reward waiting at the end, and she had begun using my name again. Caleb grew up in photographs I was not meant to see. Mercer House posted him online at ribbon cuttings and charity dinners, first as a boy in a blazer, then as a long-legged teenager standing between his parents. He had Ruth's eyes and Eric's careful smile. I never contacted him through social media. Natalie had already threatened to characterize respectful letters as harassment, and I would not hand her a public spectacle she could use against him. So once or twice a year, I looked at the company's public page, learned that he played cello, then baseball, then neither, and closed the browser before wanting became a form of self-punishment. What I could not see was the story he had been told. According to Natalie, I had emptied the family accounts, demanded ownership of a company Eric and she built alone, and disappeared when they refused. She told Caleb the Mill Street building had belonged to Eric's mother, and that I had selfishly kept the deed after Ruth died. She said my letters stopped because I started a new family in Springfield. Each lie was designed to answer one question before he could ask it. Eric corrected none of them. At 13, Caleb began working Saturdays in the Mercer House warehouse. At first, he swept floors and assembled sample kits. By 16, he loaded trucks, photographed inventory, and repaired returned furniture. Natalie told him his wages were being deposited into a college account because family businesses taught discipline. His pay stubs listed direct deposits. He never saw the account. At 18, Caleb wanted to study industrial design. Mercer House had a difficult year after expanding too quickly, and Natalie told him the college fund had temporarily been loaned to the company. "It is all family money," she said. "When the new development deal closes, you will have twice as much," Eric promised to explain later. Later did not come. Caleb enrolled at community college part-time and kept working. He started asking why the company paid consultants but could not return his wages. Natalie accused him of being ungrateful. Eric told him not to upset her during a stressful period. The pattern was older than Caleb, but he had no name for it yet. In the 14th year of the Mill Street lease, a development group called North Star Residential proposed a luxury senior complex covering 3 blocks. The plans included the Mercer House building. The public announcement described Eric and Natalie as property owners and showed an artist's rendering of the brick warehouse converted into a private dining hall. The reported acquisition price for their parcel was $2.4 million. The problem was simple. They did not own the parcel. Natalie told North Star that Mercer House had exercised its purchase option years earlier, but that an elderly relative had failed to complete a ministerial deed. She provided a copy of a 1-page memorandum bearing what looked like my signature. North Star's attorney ordered a title examination before releasing a deposit. The examiner found my deed, the recorded commercial lease, and no valid transfer. Helen called me on a Tuesday morning while I was checking a batch of lift mechanisms. "Did you sign an exercise memorandum on May 17th, 15 years ago?" she asked. "No." "Did you appear before a notary named Paul Wexler?" "Never heard of him." "Then someone has given a title company a serious problem." She emailed me the copy. My name appeared at the bottom in blue ink, slanted the way I signed delivery releases. But I knew the page immediately. The top half had been taken from the 5th document in Natalie's opening night packet. The signature looked like one I had placed on a vendor delivery form months earlier. Someone had joined the two. "Do they have an original?" I asked. "They say it was lost during a records migration." "And the notary?" "His commission did not begin until 8 months after the date on this paper." I sat down. For 15 years, I had imagined many reasons Eric might contact me. Illness, regret, Caleb's wedding. I had not imagined a copied signature arriving first. Helen advised sending immediate written notice to Mercer House, North Star, and the title insurer disputing the document. We would also file an affidavit of facts affecting title so no one could claim ignorance. "This may become a quiet title action," she said. "Before we move, I need every original you kept." I touched the brass key on my ring. The metal deed box was still beneath the old workbench at Mill Street. The lease allowed me, as owner, to inspect the property with reasonable notice, but I had not entered the building since the night I left. "I know where the original packet is," I said. That same afternoon, Second Grain's apprenticeship coordinator, Denise Harper, placed a stack of applications on my desk. We were selecting 4 apprentices for the coming year. I reviewed applications only after names and addresses had been covered, a practice Maria introduced to reduce favoritism. One applicant described 6 years of unpaid work in a family furniture warehouse, 2 years of community college drafting classes, and a belief that furniture should help a person remain independent instead of reminding them what they can no longer do. The sentence sounded like something Ruth might have said. I marked the application for an interview. "Who is candidate 17?" I asked when the scoring was complete. Denise removed the cover sheet. The name at the top was Caleb Thomas Mercer. For 15 years, my letters had failed to reach my grandson. Now, on the same day his mother used my signature to claim my building, his application had arrived on my desk. I wanted to believe in fate. Experience told me to look for the paperwork. I could have removed myself from the interview panel. Maria suggested it the moment I told her who candidate 17 was. "No one would question you," she said. "This is not an ordinary conflict. That is exactly why someone might question it." We agreed that I would observe but not score Caleb. The other panel members would decide whether he advanced. I also asked Denise not to tell him we were related before the interview. That decision may sound cold. It was not. I had spent 15 years being described through other people's motives. Caleb deserved one room in which no one arranged his answer for him. He arrived 10 minutes early wearing a blue shirt, inexpensive dress shoes, and a jacket that did not quite fit across the shoulders. When he entered the conference room and saw me, he stopped. Recognition moved across his face in stages. First uncertainty, then memory, then something guarded. "Mr. Mercer?" Denise said. "Please have a seat." His eyes stayed on me. "I know you." I folded my hands on the table. "We met when you were young. You are Thomas Mercer." "Yes." He did not call me Grandpa. I had imagined hearing that word again so many times that its absence should have hurt. Instead, I felt relief. He was not pretending. Denise explained that I would not participate in scoring. Caleb looked toward the door. "Did my mother arrange this?" "No," I said. "Your name was covered when we reviewed the application. She said you moved away and opened a company because you wanted to compete with us." Maria leaned forward. "This interview is about your work, not your family. You may leave and reschedule with a different panel if you prefer." Caleb considered it, then took the chair. "No, I came to earn a place." That answer sounded like him, though I barely knew who he had become. The interview lasted 40 minutes. He spoke well about design, but became most animated when Denise placed a damaged walker tray on the table and asked how he would improve it. He noticed the sharp underside, the cup holder positioned where a weak left hand could not reach, and the narrow clamp that would not fit an older frame. He did not propose a beautiful object. He proposed a useful one. When asked about a mistake, he admitted misreading a warehouse order that cost Mercer House $1,100. He had repaid the company through deductions from wages he was never actually allowed to receive. Afterward, the panel ranked him second among 12 candidates. He advanced to the practical test on merit. I signed no scoring sheet. He waited near the front entrance after the others left. "Why didn't you ever write?" he asked. The question struck harder than Natalie's insult had. I could have answered with accusation. Instead, I said, "I did write." His expression closed. "My mother said you would say that." "Then do not take my word for it. I have postal records and returned envelopes. If you want to see them, I will show you. If you do not, I will not bring this into your apprenticeship application." "Why would they return your letters?" "That is a question for your parents." He watched me, perhaps waiting for bitterness to reveal the man he had been taught to expect. "Did you steal money from the company?" "No." "Did you leave us?" "I left the building after your mother told me to leave. I asked your father to tell you the truth." His jaw tightened in the same way Eric's did. Everyone has records that prove their version. Not everyone. That is why some people depend on versions. He walked out without saying goodbye. The next morning, Helen and I served written notice of inspection on Mercer House. The lease would expire in 87 days. Unless a valid sale agreement existed, the company had to surrender the property in the condition required by the lease. Natalie responded within an hour, accusing me of interfering with a pending transaction and demanding all communication go through counsel. Eric did not respond. When Helen and I arrived on Mill Street 3 days later, 2 attorneys, a property manager, Natalie, and Eric were waiting. The showroom looked more expensive than I remembered and less personal. My walnut bar had been painted white. The wall where my missing name once mattered was covered with photographs of Eric and Natalie shaking hands with officials. Caleb was not there. Natalie approached as if greeting an investor. "Tom? 15 years. You look well. So does the building. We have cared for it at considerable expense." "The lease required you to." Her smile tightened. "Our lawyers will discuss interpretations." I inspected the roof, mechanical systems, and exterior masonry while Helen documented conditions. In the old workshop, half the machines were gone. My original bench had been pushed behind shipping cartons. I knelt and felt beneath the lower shelf. The metal deed box was still bolted to the floor. Natalie stepped closer. "What is that?" I held up the brass key. "Something I left where I could find it." Inside were the disputed 5th page from the opening night packet, Ruth's old business ledgers, a copy of the commercial lease, and several original construction records. Helen put on gloves before lifting the page. The paper had yellowed at the edges. Across the top were the same paragraphs that appeared in Natalie's memorandum. Across the bottom was an empty signature line. Eric sat down on a packing crate. Natalie's attorney whispered to her. She said, "That proves nothing." A later copy was executed. "Then produce the original," Helen replied. "It was lost. Conveniently." "Are you accusing my client of a crime?" the attorney asked. Helen closed the box. "I am asking for a document." As we left, Eric followed me into the loading area. His hair had thinned, and there were deep lines beside his mouth. For the first time, I saw that the 15 years had not been effortless for him either. That did not erase what he had chosen. "Dad, we need this sale," he said. "If North Star walks away, the bank can call our loans." "Did I sign that memorandum?" He looked back toward the showroom. Natalie handled the property file. "I asked what you know. I know you wanted us to have the building. Wanting you to succeed is not the same as giving you permission to lie." He lowered his voice. "Caleb applied to your company. He earned a second interview. Do not turn him against us." I almost laughed at how perfectly he had repeated Natalie's sentence. Instead, I said, "Truth does not belong to whichever side tells it first." My phone rang as Helen and I reached her car. It was Caleb. His voice was formal. "Mr. Mercer, I want to see the letters." "All right. And I want my parents present." I looked back at the loading dock, where Eric was still standing. That may not be the best way to begin. It is the only way I will know who is lying. 15 years earlier, I had asked my son to tell one truth. Now his son was asking all of us to do it in the same room. We met the following Sunday at Helen's office because it was neutral ground and because Helen had a conference table large enough for 15 years of paper. I arrived early with 2 file boxes. Caleb came alone. "My parents refused," he said. "My mother said this is a legal trap. My father said he had a migraine." Helen told him she represented me and could not advise him. She offered to pause until he found independent counsel. Caleb shook his head. "I am not signing anything. I just want to read." I placed the first returned envelope in front of him. It bore the date of his 8th birthday. Then came the 9th, 10th, Christmas cards, school year letters, photographs, certified mail receipts, and copies of the few messages that never returned. He read without speaking. On a letter sent when he was 12, I had drawn a workbench and marked the height at which I guessed he could comfortably use it. On another, I described Ruth's habit of singing the wrong lyrics to every song on the radio. Caleb touched that page with 2 fingers. "My mother told me Grandma hated the workshop," he said. "She loved the work. She hated sawdust in the washing machine." His mouth moved toward a smile and stopped. I played the saved voicemail. Natalie's younger voice filled the room. "If you contact Caleb after tonight, I will tell the police you are harassing my family. He is our son. You do not get to confuse him because your feelings are hurt." Caleb asked to hear it again. The second time, he closed his eyes. Did my father know? He knew she refused contact. I cannot tell you what he knew about every letter. You could have taken them to court. I considered it. The law did not give me an easy right to visitation, and a long fight might have placed you between adults you depended on. Maybe I chose wrong. I have asked myself that many times. He looked up sharply, perhaps surprised that I did not claim perfect judgment. "So you just waited?" "No. I worked, I wrote, and I made a place you could find. But yes, I also waited." He stood and walked to the window. "I hated you. I know. You don't know. Every birthday, I thought maybe this was the year you would remember. Then I decided I didn't care. When I saw your picture in the apprenticeship brochure, I almost tore it up." "Why didn't you?" "Because your tables are good." The answer was so honest that I laughed once, softly. He turned, offended at first, then almost smiled again. From his backpack, he removed the maple bird. The wood had darkened from years of handling. One wing had been glued after a break, and the underside still showed my tool marks. "I kept this because I wanted one thing that did not come with their explanation," he said. "I did not reach for it. It belonged to him now." Caleb returned to the table and opened the second file box. It contained bank transfers, construction invoices, and my green labor ledger. He compared the figures with copies of Mercer House's public origin story. "They said you took $80,000. I gave $64,800. The rest may be a number that grew in the telling." "Why didn't you sue them?" "At the beginning, I had little money for litigation and an oral promise that would be difficult to prove. Later, I had a life I did not want organized around their company. The commercial lease protected the building. I chose to honor it." Even after what they did? A promise is not honorable only when the other person deserves it. He studied me. That sounds like something people say when they let others use them. It can be. The difference is whether you keep making the same promise after you understand the cost. For the first time, Caleb told me about his wages. From 13 onward, Mercer House payroll records showed nearly $22,000 paid to him. Natalie had controlled the custodial account until he turned 18, then claimed the money had been loaned to the company. Caleb had asked for statements. None came. When he said he might contact the state labor department, Eric offered him a junior management title instead. "Did you accept?" I asked. "For 6 months. The title came with no salary. That is when I applied here." The family pattern was repeating, only faster. Free labor. Deferred ownership. Affection used to replace a contract. I wanted to march to Mill Street and force Eric to see what he had become. But Caleb had not come for another person to control his next decision. "You should speak with an employment attorney or the state wage office," I said. "Second Grain can give you a list of independent resources. Whether you make a claim is your choice." "You are not going to use it against them in the property case?" "It is not my evidence to use." He nodded slowly. Before leaving, he asked whether his apprenticeship application remained valid. I told him the panel would evaluate his practical test like everyone else's. "If you earn the place, you will be paid from the first hour," I added. At the door, he stopped. "I am not ready to call you Grandpa. You do not owe me a word. But I want to come back after the test, just to talk." "The door is open." He looked at the boxes. "It was always open, wasn't it?" "Yes." The following Tuesday, Caleb completed the practical examination. He measured twice, cut once, corrected another applicant who was about to put a hand near an unguarded blade, and finished third overall. The cooperative offered him one of 4 apprenticeships. He accepted without telling his parents first. Natalie found out when she saw Second Grain listed on an insurance form. She called me at 7 the next morning. "You planned this," she said. "He applied through the college. You poisoned him with old grievances." I showed him letters with dates. "You have always valued paper more than family." I thought of the false memorandum. "Only when family expects paper to lie." Her voice changed. The anger narrowed into calculation. "We should meet. There is enough money in the North Star transaction to resolve everyone's feelings. Feelings do not cloud a title. Name your price, Tom." 15 years earlier, she had decided my price was a rent-free room and the privilege of being useful. Now a developer had put $2.4 million on the building, and she believed every remaining objection could be purchased. "Bring Eric," I said. "Bring the original memorandum, and bring a written accounting of Caleb's wages." She was silent. "Thursday at Second Grain," I continued. 2 o'clock. "This is about the property, not Caleb." "That is the problem, Natalie. To you, it has always been about the property." Natalie arrived at Second Grain in a black car with Eric, her attorney, and a leather folder. She did not bring an accounting of Caleb's wages. She wore the same expression she used in Mercer House advertisements. Warm enough to invite trust, controlled enough to reveal nothing. Eric looked as though he had not slept. Maria gave them a tour before the meeting because she believed people negotiated differently after seeing the workers affected by their decisions. Natalie admired the showroom but referred to the cooperative as your charity project. Maria corrected her once. "It is an employee-owned manufacturer with $4.8 million in annual revenue." Natalie glanced at me. Tom always did need someone else to manage the numbers. The insult was smaller than the one she delivered 15 years earlier, but its purpose was the same. She needed me to become defensive. Defensive people explain too much and negotiate against themselves. We sat at a plain oak conference table built by our first apprentice class. Helen joined by video. Natalie's attorney opened with an offer. Mercer House would pay me $50,000 in exchange for a warranty deed transferring Mill Street, a release of all past claims, and a confidentiality agreement. They described the payment as recognition of sentimental interests. "The developer's price is $2.4 million, I said. "That includes the operating business, improvements, and relocation costs," Natalie replied. "North Star's letter of intent allocates $2.4 million to the parcel. I have a copy." Her attorney shifted in his chair. He had not known I had seen it. Natalie folded her hands. "You contributed a rundown building worth less than $100,000. We created the value. Then you should have no trouble moving the company and leaving the value you do not own," Eric whispered. "Dad, please." I turned to him. "Tell me why the bank can call your loans," Natalie answered. "Expansion timing. Normal business pressure?" I asked Eric. He swallowed. "We borrowed against expected proceeds from the development. Before you owned the property? We believed the option had been exercised. Natalie opened the leather folder and placed a color copy of the memorandum in front of me. It was exercised. I set the unsigned original beside it. The paragraphs matched, including a typing error in the third line. The lower section did not. Her copy had a signature and a notary stamp. Mine had only blank space. "Produce the original signed document," Helen said through the screen. "We have explained that it was lost," the attorney replied. "Then produce evidence of the payment required by paragraph 9 of the lease." Natalie looked at Eric. He stared at the table. The lease required any purchase agreement to state consideration and required Mercer House to deposit 10% of the purchase price within 10 business days. No price had ever been agreed. No deposit had ever been paid. "Tom intended it as a gift," Natalie said. "Then why fabricate a purchase exercise?" I asked. Her composure cracked for the first time. "Fabricate is a dangerous word. So is notarized." Helen displayed the Ohio Secretary of State's notary record. Paul Wexler's commission began 8 months after the date printed beside his stamp. He could not have acknowledged my signature on the stated day. Natalie's attorney removed his glasses. "My client and I need a private conversation," he said. "Before you go," I replied, "where is Caleb's money?" Natalie stood. "Our son's finances are none of your concern." The workshop door opened behind her. Caleb had finished his shift and was carrying a small tool case. "Then answer me," he said. No one had planned his entrance. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Eric half rose from his chair. "Caleb, this is a confidential meeting." "My wages are confidential from me?" Natalie stepped toward him. "Your grandfather is using you to pressure us." Caleb set the tool case on the floor and took the maple bird from his pocket. "Did you return his letters?" "He sent inappropriate things after abandoning us. I read 58 of them." "That is not all he sent." I waited. A lie often grows one extra branch when it has nowhere else to go. "What else did I send?" I asked. Natalie turned on me. "Threats. Demands for money. Pages full of accusations. Do you have them?" "We did not preserve every piece of harassment for 15 years. Caleb looked at his father. "Did you see any threats?" Eric's lips parted. Natalie said his name once, sharply. He closed his mouth. Something changed in Caleb then. Not because he had received an answer, but because he recognized the silence. It was the same silence Eric had given me beneath the brass plaque. A son can spend years believing his father is trapped. The day he sees the unlocked door is the day the trapping becomes a choice. Caleb picked up his tool case. "I am filing a wage claim," he said. "Do not contact my supervisor. Do not cancel my phone. Do not tell me this is family money." Natalie's face hardened. "If you walk out with him, do not expect us to support you. You have been supporting the company with my wages." He left without waiting for a reply. Natalie gathered her papers. "You have turned my child against me and threatened the business my husband built. If you reject this offer, we will ask the court to enforce the option and recover every dollar we invested in your property." "That is your right," I said. "You will lose. Judges do not reward men who disappear for 15 years and return for a payday." I looked at Eric. "Is that what you are going to swear happened?" He could not meet my eyes. After they left, I noticed a single sheet beneath Natalie's chair. It was not part of the legal packet. It was an internal Mercer House cash forecast. At the bottom, under emergency sources, were 2 lines. The first read, "North Star closing, $2,400,000. The second read, "Caleb custodial funds, $21,764. My grandson's missing wages had not been lost, loaned, or forgotten. They were listed as one more family asset Natalie believed she had the right to spend. I wanted to call Caleb immediately. Helen told me not to. The cash forecast had been left in our conference room, but it belonged to an opposing party in an active dispute. She instructed Maria to place it in a clear sleeve, record where and when it was found, and send written notice to Natalie's attorney. We retained a copy only after counsel confirmed the page was not privileged and asked that the original be returned. "Evidence is strongest when you do not behave as if the rules apply only to the other side," Helen said. Caleb hired an employment lawyer through a legal clinic at the technical college. His attorney requested bank statements for the custodial account named on his pay stubs. Mercer House first claimed the old records were archived. Then it claimed the account had been consolidated. Finally, under a state wage investigation, the payroll service disclosed that the routing number on Caleb's pay stubs belonged to Mercer House's operating account. The company had recorded wages as paid, withheld taxes, and kept the net funds. The internal forecast later appeared through a formal document request, exactly where it could be used without argument about how it was found. Natalie responded by filing suit before we did. Mercer House asked the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas to enforce the alleged purchase option, declare the company equitable owner of Mill Street, and prevent me from interfering with the North Star sale. The complaint described me as an absentee landlord who had accepted 15 years of improvements and was exploiting a technical defect to seize the company's value. It was a clever story because some of it was true. I had been absent. They had maintained and improved the building. The property was worth far more than it had been 15 years earlier. A persuasive lie rarely invents every brick. It builds a crooked house on a real foundation. We answered with the recorded lease, the unsigned original page, the deed, and my affidavit. We asked the court to quiet title and cancel the false memorandum. Helen did not include every betrayal, every returned letter, or Natalie's speech at the grand opening. A judge deciding title needs title evidence, she said. Pain is not a substitute for a legal element. I appreciated the discipline. For years, I had wanted someone in authority to hear the entire story. Now I understood that justice sometimes begins by asking a smaller question accurately. During discovery, a forensic document examiner compared the signature on Natalie's memorandum with known examples from the construction period. One match was exact. Not similar, exact down to a tiny ink skip in the final R. It came from a delivery release I had signed for a shipment of Italian drawer slides 9 weeks before the opening. Ruth's old ledger box contained the carbon copy. An authentic signature made twice by hand will vary. These two were identical because one had been reproduced from the other. The notary problem was worse. Paul Wexler had been a junior employee at Natalie's first marketing agency. His commission began 8 months after the date on the memorandum. In a deposition, he denied witnessing my signature and said the stamp image did not match the physical stamp he later received. He remembered Natalie asking him, years earlier, for a sample notary seal to use in presentation art, but he could not say what she did with it. Mercer House still argued that my conduct proved an oral gift. Helen asked for the purchase price, deposit, board resolution, tax return, or accounting entry showing acquisition of the building. None existed. For 15 years, the company had deducted expenses as a tenant and listed the lease as an operating obligation. Only when North Star requested title did the company begin calling itself owner. Eric came to my bungalow on a cold evening in November. He stood on the porch with no coat, though his car was parked at the curb. I almost did not let him in. Then I remembered how many years I had wanted him to cross any honest threshold. I opened the door. He sat at my kitchen table and looked around at the ordinary room. "I thought you were rich," he said. "Why?" "Natalie said Second Grain was worth millions. The cooperative owns itself. I have one voting share, like every worker owner." "Then why are you doing this? If you sell Mill Street, you get the money. We pay our loans. Everyone wins." Caleb's wages were listed as an emergency cash source. He flinched. "I didn't know about that spreadsheet. Did you know his pay went into the company account? Natalie said she set up a custodial transfer. Did you ever look?" He covered his face. His hands were older versions of the hands that once reached for mine during storms. "No." "Did you know I had not signed the property option?" This time, he did not answer quickly. I waited. "On opening night, Natalie asked if you signed the whole packet," he said. "I told her you left the vendor pages at the diner and said the property page was invalid. She said you would change your mind. A few months later, she showed me a scan with your signature. She said you came back while I was traveling and signed it in front of a notary. Did you believe her?" I wanted to. "That is not what I asked." He looked at me. "No." The word sat between us for 15 years. Eric admitted he had used the memorandum in a bank presentation 7 years later. The bank had not relied on it for a mortgage, but investors had been told Mercer House controlled the property. He had also confirmed in an email that the option was exercised, though he had never seen an original. "Natalie says if I change my statement now, everything collapses," he whispered. "Everything built on that statement should collapse. She is my wife, and Caleb is your son. I was your father when you watched her throw me out. Family tells you whom you owe honesty. It does not excuse dishonesty." He began asking what I wanted. Money? An apology in the newspaper? Control of Mercer House? I said no to each. Then what? "Correct your sworn answers. Account for Caleb's wages. Stop using my signature. Surrender the building when the lease ends. Natalie will leave me. That may be a consequence. It is not a reason to commit perjury." He stared at the photograph of Ruth on my bookshelf. "Mom would hate me." Your mother would hate what you did. She would still want you to stop doing it. When Eric left, he made no promise. 2 days later, Helen received an amended discovery response from his new, separate attorney. Attached were copies of emails, investor presentations, and a sworn declaration. In it, my son admitted that he had no evidence I signed the memorandum and that he had repeated Natalie's claim despite serious doubts. It was the first truth he had told when the truth could cost him something. People who watch courtroom dramas expect a witness to confess under a spotlight while everyone gasps. Real civil court is quieter. Papers move before people do. Lawyers argue about which facts are disputed. Judges ask narrow questions. The most important sentence may arrive in an order weeks later, printed in the same black type as every other sentence. Our hearing took place 6 months after Natalie filed the case. By then, North Star had extended its deadline twice. Mercer House's lender had frozen further credit. Natalie changed attorneys after her first counsel withdrew, citing a professional conflict that arose when the notary evidence surfaced. Eric and Natalie had separated. Caleb rented a room with another apprentice and had completed his wage complaint interview. Judge Elaine Porter entered without drama and asked both sides to identify the document that transferred ownership. Natalie's new attorney pointed to the memorandum and argued that even if its acknowledgement was defective, 15 years of improvements showed part performance of an oral agreement. Helen pointed to the lease clause, stating improvements were tenant obligations and would not create ownership. She showed the company's tax returns labeling rent, maintenance, and leasehold improvements exactly as the lease required. The judge asked, "Where is the separate purchase agreement required by Section 9? "The memorandum reflects the parties' intent," Natalie's attorney replied. "Where is the agreed price? The transfer was intended as a family gift. Then why does the memorandum say purchase option?" The attorney returned to intent. The judge returned to documents. I testified for less than an hour. Helen asked whether I signed the memorandum. I said no. She asked where I found the unsigned page. I described the metal box and brass key. She introduced photographs from the inspection and Helen's own closing copy of the original lease packet. Natalie's attorney asked why I had waited 15 years to assert ownership. "I did not wait," I said. "The recorded deed always identified me as owner. The lease gave the company possession for 15 years. I honored it. You made no effort to collect market rent. The agreed rent was $1, because you intended your son's company to have the property. I intended the company to use it. That is why we signed a lease." He asked whether I disliked Natalie. I said yes. He asked whether I wanted her business to fail. I said no. That answer appeared to surprise him. "Mr. Mercer, if the North Star transaction fails, Mercer House may enter bankruptcy. Are you telling this court you do not want that? I want the company to tell the truth about what it owns. What follows belongs to the decisions its managers made." Eric testified next. He entered through a side aisle and did not look at Natalie. Under oath, he described the opening night packet, his conversation with me at the diner, and Natalie's later claim that I had returned to sign. He admitted endorsing that claim without verification. Natalie's lawyer asked whether separation had made him hostile toward his wife. "No," Eric said. "The lie made separation necessary." Then Natalie took the stand. She denied creating the signature image. She suggested a former office manager assembled the memorandum and insisted I had verbally promised the property many times. She described herself and Eric working for 15 years while I watched the neighborhood improve from a distance. Some of what she said carried emotional weight. She had built a business. She had employed people. She had negotiated leases and soothed customers and stayed awake over payroll. Fear of losing it was real. But effort does not convert a lease into a deed. Fear does not authenticate a signature. The forensic examiner explained the exact digital match between the memorandum signature and my old vendor release. The notary record showed the impossible date. Natalie's attorney objected to several conclusions, and the judge sustained some objections. Still, the essential facts remained. Judge Porter issued her decision 9 days later. The court found no enforceable purchase agreement, no valid exercise of the option, no payment or deposit, and no credible original of the disputed memorandum. The company's improvements were made under the commercial lease and created no equitable ownership beyond its stated term. Title was quieted in my name. The recorded memorandum was declared invalid and ordered canceled. Mercer House's request to force the North Star sale was denied. The judge did not call Natalie greedy. She did not call me a good father. She wrote one line I remembered. "A familial expectation, however sincerely asserted, is not a conveyance of real property." Outside the courtroom, reporters waited because the North Star project had become local news. I gave no interview. Natalie walked past me with her face rigid. Eric stopped several feet away. "Dad," he said. I held up a hand. "Today was about the building. We have not repaired the family." He nodded. For once, he did not ask me to make the consequence smaller. Caleb had sat in the back row during the decision. On the courthouse steps, he handed me the maple bird. One wing had loosened again. "Can we fix it?" he asked. "Yes." "Will the crack show?" "A little." He considered that. "Good." That afternoon, North Star's attorney called Helen with a new offer. The developer would purchase Mill Street directly from me for $2.4 million, pay closing costs, and give Mercer House 60 days to remove its inventory. I could sign one document and become wealthier than I had ever expected. 15 years earlier, Natalie had believed my signature was worth nothing. Now everyone was waiting to see what I would do with it. I wish I could say I rejected the money without hesitation. I did not. $2.4 million can repair a great many roofs, fund apprenticeships, and make old age less frightening. I walked through my bungalow that evening, calculating what the offer could buy. Then I drove to Mill Street after dark and sat across from the warehouse. North Star's rendering replaced the workshop with a private dining room for residents who could afford $6,000 a month. The brick exterior would remain because developers liked the language of history when the people who made that history were gone. The building might display an old plane or saw behind glass. No one would be allowed to use it. Ruth had once said a workshop should never become a museum while someone still needed to learn a trade. The next morning, I met with Maria, Owen, Helen, representatives from the technical college, and a community development lender. I made clear that the property was mine, but the decision should not become a monument to me. We examined 3 options. Second Grain could buy the property, but using cooperative funds would slow wages and expansion. I could sell to North Star and donate part of the proceeds, but the building would be lost. Or I could place Mill Street under a nonprofit land trust with a 99-year mission restriction requiring vocational education and affordable workshop space. The third option produced no personal windfall. It also preserved the reason Ruth and I bought the building in the first place. We created the Ruth Mercer Trades Trust. I contributed the property subject to a long-term lease for the new center. A state brownfield program funded environmental work. The county committed workforce development money. A community lender financed renovation against future leases from the college, Second Grain, and 3 small trades businesses. The trust board included 1 neighborhood resident, 1 college representative, 2 trades workers, and 1 Mercer family member who could not hold unilateral control. I chose Caleb for that future seat after he completed his apprenticeship, not before. "You are giving away more than $1 million in equity," Eric said when he learned the plan. We were standing inside the nearly empty showroom. Mercer House had entered Chapter 11 after North Star terminated its agreement, then converted to liquidation when no replacement financing appeared. The court-appointed trustee was inventorying furniture. Employees would receive wage notices and information about claims. I had granted the trustee an extra 60 days beyond the lease term so workers, not Natalie, would have time to remove orders and personal tools. "I am deciding what the property is for," I told Eric. "That is different from giving it to someone who lies about owning it. You could have saved the company. The company borrowed money by promising an asset it did not own. Saving it would require pretending that decision had no cost. People are losing jobs, and that matters. Second Grain has offered interviews to every shop worker. The county has a placement team here on Friday. What I will not do is hand your debts to my future." Eric looked around the showroom. Without the displays, I could see the marks where my old machines had stood. "I let this happen," he said. "Yes." He waited, perhaps expecting comfort. I had spent most of his life placing comfort before accountability. "What do I do now?" he asked. "Start with Caleb." The wage investigation resulted in a settlement. Mercer House acknowledged that Caleb's net wages had been retained without authorization. In bankruptcy, part of his claim received wage priority. The rest became a personal restitution obligation Eric and Natalie signed to avoid further state penalties. Caleb did not receive all the money at once. He received a first payment, a schedule, and legal rights if payments stopped. It was less dramatic than discovering a secret trust account. It was also real. Natalie came to Mill Street on the final day to collect boxes from her office. She found me in the old workshop, removing the metal deed box from beneath the bench. For the first time since I had known her, she wore no makeup. She looked tired rather than polished, frightened rather than powerful. "Are you satisfied?" she asked. "No. You got the building. Caleb will barely speak to me." Eric moved out. The company is gone. What else could you want? I wanted none of those things to happen this way. You could have prevented them with one signature. You could have prevented them with one truth. Her eyes moved to the brass key in my hand. You planned this for 15 years. I honored a lease for 15 years. That is the same thing in the story you tell yourself, I almost argued. Then I recognized the trap. Natalie needed my refusal to be revenge because revenge would make us alike. She could understand punishment. What she could not understand was a boundary that did not depend on her agreement. When you called me a loser, I said, I believed the worst thing you took was my place in the company. It took me years to understand that I had given that place away before you took it. I let family promises replace clear terms. I let Eric's silence answer for him. I will not do that again. So this is about pride. It is about stewardship. She laughed without humor. You always did like noble words for stubbornness. She lifted her box and walked toward the door. I called her name. She turned. Caleb is not a property to be won, I said. If you want a relationship with him, stop telling him what he owes you and answer what he asks. For 1 second, pain opened in her face. Then the old control returned. Do not tell me how to be a mother. I am telling you what I learned too late about being a father. After she left, I opened the metal box one final time. The unsigned paper lay on top. I could have framed it as a trophy. Instead, Helen archived it with the trust records, where it would remain evidence and nothing more. We removed the white paint from the walnut bar. Beneath it, the original grain was scarred but intact. Eric's first apology arrived in an email. It was 7 paragraphs long and contained the word "but" 11 times. I read it once and did not respond. His second apology came by phone and explained how Natalie's childhood poverty made her afraid, how the bank pressured them, how he believed success would eventually give him room to make everything right. I listened and said, an explanation can help you understand a choice. It does not make the choice mine to excuse. His third apology came 6 months after the court decision. He drove to Second Grain during my lunch break and asked to speak outside. He had taken a sales job with an office supply distributor and rented a 1-bedroom apartment. His suit was off the rack. He carried no folder and asked for no signature. I knew she was cheating you, he said. Maybe not every detail, not at first. But I knew enough. I let her erase you because I thought admitting what you gave would make my success look smaller. When she called you a loser, I wanted to stop her, and I chose the company instead. Then I spent 15 years telling myself the next deal would make it safe to tell the truth. There was always another deal. He stopped. No, but followed. What are you apologizing for? I asked. His face tightened. For taking your money and labor. For letting her push you out. For helping keep Caleb from you. For repeating a property claim I did not believe. For teaching my son that silence was how men survived conflict. That was an apology. It did not restore 15 years. It did not obligate me to trust him. But it named the damage without asking the person harmed to make it less painful. I told him we could meet for breakfast once a month. No money requests, no discussion of the property, and no pressure on Caleb. If Eric wanted a relationship with his son, he had to build it directly and accept whatever distance Caleb needed. Eric agreed. For the first 3 breakfasts, we spoke about weather, work, and baseball. On the 4th, he brought my old green ledger. The bankruptcy trustee had released it from Mercer House's accounting files. Eric had added a new section listing what he personally owed, Caleb's restitution, unpaid amounts to former workers, and my $64,800 contribution. He could not repay everything. The list was larger than his income and smaller than the damage. Do not promise money you cannot pay, I said. Then what do I do with this? Use it to stop lying to yourself about the size of the obligation. Pay what the agreements require. If you have extra, decide whom it helps most. I am not first. He made his restitution payments to Caleb on time. He also volunteered 2 Saturdays a month with the team converting Mill Street, at first doing work no one could interpret as authority. Debris removal, floor scraping, loading dumpsters. Former Mercer House employees did not welcome him warmly. He did not demand that they recognize his remorse. He kept showing up. Caleb's path was not as simple as choosing me and rejecting his parents. Love does not obey the moral clarity of a court order. He was furious with Eric, then missed him, then felt guilty for missing him. He wanted Natalie to admit what she had done and hated himself for still wanting her approval. Second Grain paid for 6 counseling sessions for every apprentice, a benefit Maria had introduced years earlier. Caleb used all 6 and continued with his own money. Some days I think if I forgive them, It means the lies were acceptable, he told me while we repaired the maple bird. I cut a narrow sliver of darker walnut to reinforce the cracked wing. Forgiveness, if you choose it, describes what you carry. Trust describes what access you give. They are not the same decision. Have you forgiven Dad? Some days. That is not a very grandfatherly answer. It is the honest one. Caleb smiled. By then he had begun calling me Grandpa when he forgot to guard himself. The first time happened in the shop. He was lifting a cabinet side and said, "Grandpa, can you take the other end?" We both froze. He looked embarrassed. I took the other end and said nothing. Later, alone in my truck, I cried hard enough that I had to wait before driving. Natalie moved to Cincinnati after the bankruptcy case closed. The court imposed costs against Mercer House in the title action, and the invalid memorandum remained part of the public record. The title insurer referred the document to local authorities, but no criminal case was filed while questions remained about who assembled the final page and when. That disappointed people who wanted handcuffs. It did not disappoint me. The civil judgment protected the property. The bankruptcy exposed the finances. The wage order protected Caleb. Justice had done what we could prove it should do. Natalie sent Caleb 3 letters during his first apprentice year. The first blamed Eric. The second blamed stress. The third contained one sentence without qualification. I returned your grandfather's letters because I was afraid you would love him more than you loved me. Caleb showed it to me and asked what he should do. Whatever lets you remain honest and safe, I said. He chose to meet her with his counselor present. He did not tell me every detail afterward, and I did not ask. Their relationship belonged to them. He came home quiet, placed the wooden bird on my kitchen table, and said, "She still wants the story to end with everyone understanding why she did it. Understanding is not acquittal." That is what I told her. At the end of his first year, Caleb presented his apprentice project, a writing desk adjustable for someone with limited strength on one side. The lifting handle resembled the removable arm I had built for Lila Bennett 15 years earlier. He had never seen that chair, only the faded design notes in Second Grain's archive. The review panel awarded him no special treatment. His finish had one cloudy patch, and his cable channel needed improvement. He passed. Owen, now walking with a cane, leaned toward me during the presentation. "Boy builds a good door," he whispered. "Yes," I said, and he found it himself. The Ruth Mercer Trade Center opened 17 months after the court decision. We kept the original brick, repaired the tall factory windows, and divided the ground floor into teaching bays for carpentry, electrical work, building maintenance, and adaptive design. The old showroom became a public gallery where apprentices could sell work without surrendering ownership of their names. The loft where I had once lived became classrooms and a legal clinic that taught contracts, licensing, and small business bookkeeping. Above the entrance, the sign read, "Ruth Mercer Trade Center." Beneath it, in smaller letters, were the words she had said about the broken rocker on the day we met. "Some things are worth saving because they cannot be replaced." I worried the sentence was too sentimental. Maria said that after 15 years of ledgers, I was entitled to one sentence Ruth would have liked. More than 300 people attended the opening. Former Mercer House workers came with their families. Second Grain employee owners demonstrated adaptive furniture. The technical college enrolled its first 24 students. Owen sat in the front row beside Lila Bennett, whose husband had died years earlier but whose modified maple chair still stood at her breakfast table. Eric arrived alone and took a seat near the back. He had completed a year of restitution payments and had not missed a breakfast. That did not place him in the front row, and he did not ask to be moved. Caleb greeted him briefly, then returned to the apprentice group. Natalie did not attend. She sent no message. I mention that because endings often force every person into the same room for a final apology. Life does not. Sometimes a boundary remains a closed door, and the person outside decides whether to knock differently. The trust board asked me to speak. I had spent weeks refusing and finally agreed to 5 minutes. Standing at the walnut bar we had stripped and restored, I could see the place where Natalie once held her champagne glass. The memory no longer owned the room. I took an old bank receipt from my pocket. The paper was thin from years inside Ruth's photograph frame. "On the night I left this building," I began, "my personal balance was $312.17. I wrote it down because I believed the number proved what my daughter-in-law said about me. I had no company, no home I could enter, no name on the wall. I thought pride was a list of things other people could see." The room was completely quiet. Caleb stood beside the first workbench, holding the maple bird. That belief was not created by one cruel sentence, I continued. It was created by years in which I treated my own work as less valuable because it was done for family. I signed a lease without securing the ownership I was promised. I gave labor no one had to account for. I accepted silence as if it were peace. The lesson is not that we should stop helping the people we love. The lesson is that love should not require one person to disappear. I unfolded the receipt. $312 measured the money available to me that night. It did not measure what I knew, what I could build, or who might stand beside me when I finally asked for honest help. It did not measure Owen driving 36 minutes when he promised 40. It did not measure Maria teaching two stubborn mechanics how to cost a screw. It did not measure 58 letters, a wooden bird, or a grandson's courage to ask what happened. Owen removed his glasses and wiped them on his sleeve. Maria looked at the ceiling. People have called what happened revenge, I said. It was not. Revenge would have made this building about the people who tried to take it. Ruth would have hated that. This center exists for the people who have not yet been given a key. I stepped away from the microphone and handed the brass key to Caleb. It no longer opened the metal box. We had replaced the lock during renovation. Its purpose was symbolic now, and for once I did not object to symbolism. Caleb returned the wooden bird to me. The walnut repair formed a dark line along the wing. "We should put him somewhere people can see," he said. "The crack shows." That is the point. We placed the bird inside a small glass case near the entrance, beside no photograph of me and no story about the lawsuit. The card beneath it read, "First lesson. Repair does not mean erasure." After the ceremony, Eric approached while Caleb and I were closing the tool cabinets. "That was a good speech," he said. "Thank you." He looked toward the sign bearing his mother's name. "I wish I had listened to her." "So do I." "Do you think she would forgive me?" "Your mother is not here to answer. You have to become a man who no longer needs the dead to erase his choices." The words hurt him. Truth sometimes does. He nodded, picked up a broom, and began sweeping the floor. Caleb watched him for a moment, then brought over a second broom. They worked from opposite ends of the room. I did not call it reconciliation. I called it a beginning. Near sunset, the last visitors left. Warm light moved across the repaired floor, revealing old machine marks beneath the new finish. I locked the teaching bays and stood alone at the entrance. 15 years earlier, I had walked out through that door in the rain, believing my life had been reduced to one suitcase and $312. Natalie thought she had removed my name, my family, and my right to be proud. She had succeeded only as long as I accepted her definition. I did not become proud because a judge returned my building. The deed had always been mine. I became proud when I stopped offering my dignity as collateral for someone else's approval. I became proud when I kept a promise without surrendering the truth. I became proud when my grandson could look at every record, make his own choice, and still keep the part of his heart that wanted a family. Before closing the front door, I looked at the bird with its visible walnut seam. Ruth had been right from the beginning. Some things were worth saving because they could not be replaced. But saving them did not mean pretending they had never been broken. I turned the key, stepped into the evening, and found Caleb waiting beside my truck. "Ready, Grandpa?" he asked. This time, neither of us pretended not to hear the word. "Yes," I said. "Let's go home."